The sky above the arena was dark red, filled with roaring winds and flashes of lightning. Crowds from across the galaxy filled the stone seats. Shouting and chanting for blood, in the center stood a human alone, calm and silent. His name was Captain Jace Vorn, a soldier from Earth. No armor, no shield, just a simple sword strapped to his back. Across from him stood Grathic the Crusher, the alien champion, 6 arms, each holding a deadly blade. His muscles bigger than Jace's whole body. Grathic roared to the crowd, and the ground shook beneath his feet. Everyone knew the outcome before the fight began. No one had ever survived a duel with Grathic, high above the arena. Princess Leia watched from her golden throne. She wore a silver crown and robes made of living silk. Her cold eyes stared at Jace, as if he was already dead. "He is only human," she whispered. "This will be over in seconds." But Jace didn't flinch. He stood like a statue, while Grathic spun his blades and charged like a beast. The duel began with thunder and flashing steel. The alien moved fast blades, slicing the air in all directions. He aimed to cut Jace into pieces, to make him an example, but Jace moved only once. One step forward, one clean draw of his blade. A silver flash in the air faster than anyone could see, and Grathic stopped moving. He stood still, his 6 arms frozen in the middle of attack. Then his body slowly split apart from shoulder to waist. The crowd went silent a moment later. Grathic's body fell to the ground in 2 perfect halves. Blood poured across the arena floor. Everyone gasped. Even Princess Leia stood from her throne, her eyes wide with shock. The arena, which had never known silence, suddenly felt like a graveyard. The elder priest stepped forward, his voice shaking. "By the law of the old stars," he said, "the victor of the blood duel shall claim the prize." Jace looked confused. "What prize?" he asked, his voice echoing in the stillness. The priest turned toward the royal platform. Princess Leia and her royal handmaidens now belonged to the human warrior. Gasps and murmurs filled the arena. Leia's face turned red with fury. "This is nonsense," she shouted. "I am royalty. I will not belong to a human." But the law was older than her family, older than the Empire. It was unbreakable. Written into the stars, if she refused, her bloodline would be cursed. And the Empire thrown into chaos. Jace raised a hand. "I didn't come here to take anyone," he said. "I came to stop your people from raiding Earth's outer colonies." But the council ignored his words. They already started the sacred ritual. Royal guards escorted Jace to the ceremonial chambers. Leia followed, silent and furious. Behind her walked 6 alien women, her handmaidens. Each dressed in silk. They didn't speak either. But their eyes were filled with curiosity, even fear, in the golden chamber. Leia turned to Jace and said coldly, "You think this victory makes you powerful, human?" "It doesn't. I will never accept you." Jace looked at her with calm eyes. "I didn't want this," he said, "but now that it's happened, I'm not leaving." He turned toward the giant windows, where the stars blinked in silence. "Something's wrong here," he whispered. "This wasn't just a fight. It was a test." One of the maids, the youngest, stepped forward, her voice soft. "You're right," she said. "We called for a human." "Because we had no other hope?" Jace turned sharply. "What do you mean?" But before she could answer, the royal drums began to beat again. Another announcement from the council. The people of the Empire had just learned. The human had won. The sacred duel, and Bailahi, now ruled the bloodline of their strongest warrior. Outside the palace, some cheered, many panicked, because in the history of the stars, no human had ever won such a duel, and no one knew what would happen next, not even Jace. But one thing was now certain. His victory had changed the future of an entire empire. The royal doors slammed shut. Behind Jace Vorn, he stood in the throne room, surrounded by cold silence. A human outsider, now master of a royal line he never wanted. But this wasn't a victory, it felt like a trap dressed as honor. Princess Leia sat alone, staring at her reflection in a tall crystal mirror. The mirror didn't lie, she was no longer just royalty. She was now bound by ancient law to a human. a warrior who cut her champion in half with one strike. She hated the law, hated the silence in the court, hated the stares of her own people. Jace didn't ask for her or her handmaidens, but by law, they were now his concubines. It was the same law that had built the empire, and the same law that could now burn it to the ground if broken. Across the hall, two alien nobles whispered to each other. "He must be removed," one said. "If we break the law, we lose power," the other replied. "But if he dies, the bond ends." Larea heard them but said nothing. She wasn't ready to protect the human. Not yet. Meanwhile, Jace sat alone on the marble balcony, watching the twin moons rise. He didn't want women forced to serve him. He wanted answers. Why had this happened? And what did they mean by hope? That night, one of the handmaidens quietly approached. She knelt by his side, her voice barely a whisper.
"Oh, yes."
"Forgive me, my lord. But I must speak." Jace looked at her kindly. "You don't have to kneel," he said, "and I'm not your lord." She glanced around, afraid of being seen. "There's something you must know. Before you arrived, we sent out a message." "To who?" Jace asked. "To Earth," she said. "We asked for one of your kind to come here." Jace was stunned. "You wanted this?" "Not this," she whispered. "Not like this, but we needed a human to win, so the old laws would activate." Jace's mind raced. "You used the duel as a trigger," he said slowly. "You planned for me to win. But why?" The maid stood and placed a small, glowing cube in his hand. "Watch this," she said, "wherein you will understand why even the princess is afraid." She vanished into the shadows, leaving Jace alone. Planets burning, stars exploding, fleets destroyed. At the center of it all was a Symbolan, old Terran flag. The message was from over 600 years ago. It ended with a voice, rough and human. "If we fall, bury the truth," the voice said. "Hide everything. Until another human rises." Jace stared at the message, stunned. The duel was never just about pride. It was a key, meant to unlock something hidden, something ancient, something dangerous. And now, the key had been turned by him in the chambers. Above, Princess Larea cried for the first time in years. Not because she was claimed, but because she knew what came next. War. Old enemies would return, and only a human could stop them. But would he fight? For the empire that enslaved him? Or would he burn it all down? The floor beneath Jace's feet began to glow. Not bright, but soft. Like ancient veins coming alive under his boots. He hadn't moved, hadn't touched anything. And yet, the ground itself responded to his presence. From the shadows, the youngest handmaiden stepped out again. Her name was Niari, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. "You activated it," she whispered. Just by standing there, Jace looked down, confused. "What is it?" he asked. Niari didn't answer. She just reached for a hidden panel in the stone wall. It opened with a hiss, revealing a narrow spiral staircase leading deep underground. "No one is allowed here," she said, "except those marked by the ancestors." Jace hesitated. "Why me?" "Because the system recognizes your blood," Niari replied. "You are human." They descended together, step after step. The air growing colder, the stone walls were covered in carvings of wars. Kings, and most of all, humans. Humans, standing above empires. Humans, commanding beasts. Humans, making alien queens kneel. "These carvings," Jace whispered. "They're not just art, no," Niari said. "They're warnings." They reached a final door, sealed, with energy lines that pulsed red, but the moment Jace touched the surface, the lines turned gold, the door split open, no key needed. Inside was a chamber that looked untouched by time. Floating in the center was a galaxy map, projected in blue light. But something was wrong. Half the stars were red. Blinking Niari walked to the edge of the platform. "This is the real map," she said, "not the one shown to the public." Jace stared. "What do the red stars mean?" "Lost," she whispered. "Entire worlds. Gone." He reached out, zooming in on the closest one. It was Earth. "Wait," he said, voice shaking. "Earth isn't destroyed." I just came from there. She turned to him slowly. Not your Earth. The other one. Jace's heart sank. You mean? We've been here before, Niari nodded. Your kind was here 600 years ago. They were leaders, heroes. And monsters? In the center of the room was a stone altar. Jace approached it. And the stone melted open like liquid. Inside was a weapon, shaped like a sword but glowing with plasma. Carved into the blade was a phrase written in Old Terran. Script, if one human returns, give them the truth in the fire. As he picked it up, the chamber shook above them. Alarms began to scream. Guards were searching. Someone had discovered their absence. Jace turned to Niari. What now? She looked terrified. They'll know what you saw, she said. They'll try to kill you before you understand it all. Jace looked back at the glowing stars on the map. So many blinking red, so many lives already lost. This wasn't about some princess or a law anymore. It was about something bigger, older than even the Empire itself. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber walls. Princess Luera's voice, sharp and commanding. Bring him to my live, she ordered. No harm is to come to the human. Jace and Niari looked at each other in shock. She knows, Niari whispered, and she's protecting you now. But Jace wasn't sure why. Was it guilt? Fear? Or had she seen what he had seen and realized the same truth? That the Empire was built on a lie, and he had just woken up the storm hiding beneath it. As the guards broke into the stairway above, Jace gripped the glowing blade. I came here to stop attacks on Earth, he muttered. Now I think I'm here to stop something much worse. The chamber door began to close, and just before it sealed shut, the map changed. A new line appeared, glowing from Earth, all the way back to this palace marked with 2 words in ancient human code, Last Flame. And for the first time, Jace understood he wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was the last spark of a forgotten fire, and the galaxy was about to feel its heat again. Asterisk Princess Vial stood alone in the mirror hall. 100 reflections stared. Back at her each, one cold, proud, and confused, but only one was real. Only one heart inside her chest beat with growing fear. She had spent her life believing her people were the highest race in the galaxy the Velcaron Empire had ruled for. Over 1,000 years they called themselves the pure-blooded, the chosen of the ancients. But now, everything felt wrong. A simple human had broken their champion in a single blow, refused her body when it was offered by law, and today she had seen secret messages passing between her own guards. Messages about ancient weapons waking. Something was changing. No one could stop. A soft knock came from the side wall. It was not a door, not visible to outsiders. Only those born in the palace knew it was there. The Queen's oldest historian stepped in, Master Al. His face was full of wrinkles and secrets. He bowed low, his voice thin like dried leaves. You summoned me, Princess? She turned sharply. Tell me the truth. About what, my lady? She walked closer, her voice low. About the humans. From before, Al froze, his hands trembling, that history is sealed. He whispered. Vial's eyes burned. Unseal it, he sighed. Then reached into his robe and pulled out a small black cube. With a twist it glowed, projecting images. Into the air. Strange scenes. War. Flames. And humans. Leading alien armies. Destroying Velcaron cities. Kneeling kings handing over crowns to men in Terran uniforms. The humans came here once, Al said softly. They arrived from the stars in silver ships. At first, they brought peace-sharing food, medicine, knowledge, but then they began to lead, not follow. And soon, the empires of this quadrant bent their knees to Earth. Vial watched in silence. They conquered us? She asked. No, Al said sadly. We asked them to lead us, 'cause they were stronger, wiser, and kinder. She stared at him, her voice like ice. Then what happened? Al looked down. One day, they vanished. No reason. No goodbye. Their ships disappeared, their cities emptied. Some say they left by choice. Others say they were called to something greater. But before they left, he said, raising a finger, they gave us a warning. Never forget that kindness is not weakness. The hologram ended. The room dark again. Vile sat down slowly, her heart heavy. So, this man, Rin. He might be a descendant of those humans, Al. Nodded, and if he is, he may not just be stronger. He may be the spark they left behind. Outside, storm clouds were gathering, not in the sky, but in the minds of generals, were nobles and warriors. Some called Rin a threat. Others whispered of prophecy. One thing was certain: peace would not last much longer. Meanwhile, in the warrior quarters, Rin stared out over the courtyard. The air smelled like fire. Something was burning far off. But it wasn't a building. It was fear. Fear spreading through the palace like wildfire. Tali stepped beside him, holding warm tea. "You look troubled," she said. Rin nodded. "Your people are planning something." She didn't deny it. "They're afraid of you," she said, "and things they never wanted to believe." Rin looked at her. "What if I told you? This isn't the first time humans were here?" She paused, her eyes widened slightly. "You know?" "I saw a map," Rin said. "A secret one. It marked Earth as lost, but also said, 'Last flame.'" Tali sat beside him, her voice shaking. "I heard that phrase once," she whispered. "When I was a child, one of the old maids told a story. About a time when the stars obeyed humans, she said, if a flame-bearer ever returned, the empire would fall or rise. Again, but never stay the same." Rin's hand curled into a fist. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said. "I came here to survive." "Now everyone's looking at me like I'm some kind of prophecy." Tali looked up at him. "Maybe you're not the prophecy," she said. "Maybe you're just the one strong enough to hold it." Back in the mirror hall, Vile stood before the glass once more, but this time she didn't see her reflection. She saw Rin standing in the courtyard, calm, quiet, powerful. She turned to Al, her voice clear. "Prepare my armor," she said. "Not the royal robe's war armor, for—" "What battle, my lady?" the old man asked. Vile looked at him with burning eyes. "The one coming soon," she said, "because if our empire is built on lies, then I must decide if I will defend those lies, or stand beside the one who might burn them all." The palace of Valkara slept beneath a cold silver moon, but not all inside were at rest. Some hearts beat with fear, others with plans, and in the deepest shadows. Death moved silently. 3 cloaked figures crept across the inner walls. Their feet made no sound, their blades poisoned with sleeproot and shadow steel. They wore no royal symbols, only the mark of the secret order, known as the Pale Silence. Killers loyal not to the crown, but to the ancient code, silence the threat before the empire trembles. And tonight, the threat was human, inside the guest chamber. Rin sharpened a curved blade under low candlelight. He wasn't used to soft beds or silk sheets. He liked the sound of steel, the smell of oil and sweat. Tali and Ina had fallen asleep on cushions. Near the fire, Vial rested farther away, her eyes closed but not truly sleeping. Rin suddenly paused, his hand freezing mid-motion. He heard it not sound, but lack of it. The hallway had gone. To still, even the wind had stopped. He rose slowly. Stepping between the girls and the door, the air changed thicker, heavier. His instincts screamed. They were not alone. The door exploded open. 3 assassins poured in silent as ghosts. Fast as lightning, blades flashed toward his throat. Rin moved like a whisper of fire. He caught the first blade with his gauntlet. Twisting the wrist until it snapped, the attacker screamed, but Rin already spun, elbowed the second in the jaw, and flipped him into the wall. The third nearly reached Tali. She gasped awake, just in time to see the blade raze Rin through his dagger with perfect aim. Struck the assassin's arm, saving her by inches. Ina screamed, scrambling behind furniture. Vile sat upright now, watching the battle unfold. Not with fear, but shock, because even outnumbered, even wounded, Rin did not fall. He commanded the fight like it was music. Every move was exact, brutal, clean, within seconds. 2 assassins lay unconscious or dead. The last one, young, desperate, turned and tried to run. Rin caught him by the collar and slammed him into the marble floor. His voice was cold. "Who sent you?" The man trembled, blood on his lip. "Princess Vile," he whispered. She gave the order. Silence filled the room. Tali looked at Vile, stunned. Ina's eyes filled with tears. Rin didn't look at Vile, not yet. He tied the assassin with cloth and shoved him aside. Then finally, he turned. The flame in his eyes was not rigid. It was betrayal, but he spoke calmly. Is it true? Vile stood, expression unreadable. I gave the order the night after the duel, she said. I thought you were a danger to everything we built. Do you still believe that? He asked. She hesitated. I don't know anymore, Rin. Shook his head. Then let me tell you what you just destroyed. I was ready to leave quietly, he said, voice low, to walk away from the law, the title, the power. But now? He stepped forward. Now, I know I can't, because if I leave, others like these men will keep coming for me. For the girls, for anyone who dares change the old rules. He looked at Tali and Ina, then at Vile. I didn't want to lead. He said softly, but now I have no choice. The next morning, the palace guards arrested the surviving assassin. High Council demanded a hearing. Rumors spread like wildfire. The princess tried to kill the flame bearer. Some called for her execution, others whispered civil war. But Rin spoke on her behalf before the council. She made a mistake, he said. Ow. But she stood there and owned it when I asked. The queen listened silently, but her face was carved. From stone, her empire was splitting in. She knew it. The nobles no longer feared her. They looked now at the human. And the women beside him, that night, Vile sat alone in a side chamber, her crown removed. Her hands shaking, she had tried to kill him, but he had defended her. What kind of man defends the one who sent blades to his throat? A knock came, the door opened, and Rin entered slowly. I should hate you, she whispered, not meeting his eyes. Rin nodded. You still can, he said. But that won't change what's coming. She looked up. What is coming? Looked out the tall window toward the stars. War, he said. But not just with weapons. A war of truth, of past versus future, and whether you stand with me or against me. The empire will never be the same again. Asterisk, the royal banners of House Vile were lowered at sunrise, silken cloth, once bright with honor, now hung limp and shadowed by shame. Servants whispered in the halls, guards avoided her eyes, and Princess Vile was no longer a princess. The queen had spoken the old words before the high court, replacing pride before peace. For drawing a blade in secret, when honor stood in daylight, she shall be stripped of her title, and by law, placed into the house of the one she tried to silence. The crowd had gasped, but none protested. Vile had broken their oldest law. She had plotted against a blood-right victor, and now she was no longer above anyone. She had become a living. A symbol of her own failure, she sat alone in her chambers, her royal robes gone, replaced with soft linen. Her once maids Stally and Enna watched silently from the corner. Neither mocked her. They had served her once. Now, strangely, they stood beside Rin, not behind her. A knock sounded. The door opened, and he stepped in. Rincome, tall, quiet as ever. His gaze didn't carry judgment or cruelty, only calm power. Vile looked away. You won, she whispered. Is that what this feels like? He asked gently. She laughed bitterly. To you? Maybe, but Rin shook his head. This doesn't feel like winning, he said. I didn't want you broken. Vile, she turned sharply. You think I'm broken. I think you're angry because the world isn't what you thought, he said. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of truth. She stood slowly, facing him now. I was raised to rule, she said, to lead with fear, to believe. Our blood was pure, that other species were lesser. Her voice cracked. But then you came. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. Later that night, in his new private quarters, Rin sat with the council scrolls. Offers had come, ambassadors. From rival planets, noble houses sending gifts. Some wanted peace, others wanted war, but they all wanted him. Tally entered quietly and poured him tea. You should rest, she said. You've barely slept in 3 nights. He nodded but didn't look up. Rest comes after the storm. He muttered. Ina stepped in next, carrying a fresh cloak. The queen has asked for a final audience tomorrow, she said. She's stepping down. Rin froze. The queen? She's naming a successor, Ina whispered, but no one knows who. At that same moment, Vile stood in the old crystal garden where ancient Velkaran queens once meditated. She touched the frozen petals of a crystal rose once, believed to bring clarity to rulers. I was never meant to be queen, she said quietly. But I was also never meant to be silent. Behind her, the queen appeared, older, slower now. Her face marked with both wisdom and regret. You learned more in a week than I did in 20 years, the queen said. You saw your empire's cracks and didn't look away? Vial didn't turn around. I saw them because he showed me, she whispered. The queen smiled faintly. Then perhaps. He wasn't sent to destroy us. Maybe he came to remind us who we once were. She stepped closer. I am leaving the throne, she said softly, and I will name no king. But a house built on truth, not titles. The house of flame and stone. VL finally turned, tears in her eyes. You're naming him? The queen shook her head. I'm naming all three of you. The next day, the palace was full of nobles, merchants, soldiers, and guests from across systems. No one knew what to expect. The queen walked forward and laid down the royal crown not in a single hand, but into three, to Rin, the human warrior, to Vile, the fallen princess, and to Tali, the maid who once served in silence, but now stood with fire in her heart. This is the new face of Velkara, the queen declared. Not a ruler, but a balance. Not a throne, but a home rebuilt. That night, Rin stood on the palace balcony, staring at the stars. Vile stepped beside him not as property, not as punishment, but as an equal. I hated you, she said softly. I know, he replied. I tried to kill you, she said. I know that too. She looked at him with new eyes. But I'd follow you now, she whispered. Not because I must, but because I believe in you. Rin looked at her. And I believe in what we can build together. The fall of a princess had become the rise of something far greater. A new house, born of blood, truth, and a strange human fire that refused to burn with hate, and the galaxy had started to watch. Because this was no longer just a story about war, it was the beginning of a legend. The twin suns rose over Velkra Prime, casting golden light on a world that no longer looked the same. The banners of war were gone. The symbols of ancient pride had been lowered, replaced by something new, something no one expected. On the great balcony of the royal tower stood three figures. A human warrior with a scarred face and quiet eyes, a former princess once wrapped in pride and fear, and a maid who had risen from the shadows with courage in her heart. Together they were called the House of Flame and Stone, not by blood, not by force, but by choice. Whispers spread across the galaxy like wildfire. They didn't take the throne. They rebuilt it. He didn't conquer them. He changed them. What kind of man wins loyalty without claiming it? Ambassadors arrived from other systems, some in ships, heavy with gold, others with spies hiding in their crew, but no matter what they brought, Rin met them the same way, calm, strong, polite, and impossible to control in court meetings. Vile sat beside him, no longer cold. She had become sharper, wiser, still proud, but not blind. When nobles tested her, she didn't scream or threaten. She smiled and let them talk. Until they ran out of words, Tali handled diplomacy's soft voice, clever mind. She knew how to move a room without raising her voice. Ina, once shy, now trained young girls in defense. She carried a blade under her robes and walked with quiet fire inside the palace. Servants laughed more freely. Guards trained with humans and aliens side by side. A child once forbidden from the upper halls now ran across marble floors, and Rin. He spent mornings walking the grounds, not as a ruler, but as a soldier who still believed in the weight of peace. He fixed broken training gear, taught younger warriors how to think before they struck. He never wore a crown, but everyone knew he didn't need one night. After the third full moon of the season, Veal entered his chamber, not in fear, not in shame, but with quiet steps and eyes full of memory. You've done what no one else could, she said. You made them follow, and still let them be free. Rin looked at her gently. I didn't want to rule, he said. I only wanted to survive. She smiled softly. Then why do we all feel safe only when you lead? He didn't answer. He only opened his arms. For the first time, she leaned into them. Not as a reward, but as a partner. By law, they were still bound, but by life. They had chosen each other. Tali and Ina joined them soon after. Not out of custom, but because they had grown into this family. Stronger together, equal in purpose. 3 alien women, once divided by rank, now bound by trust, not chains, a cross. Velkara, others watched and followed. Some noble daughters stepped down from power and joined the blade halls. Some low-born sons were given books and chances never known before. And at the center of it all was a human, one who had cut a champion in half, but never once lifted a hand against those weaker on the day of unity. Thousands gathered in the central square. Rin stepped forward and raised no sword. Instead, he raised a child, a small orphan from a forgotten village, who now carried the house's symbol in his hands. This is the future, Rin said, not made of bloodlines. It's not sealed by laws, but chosen by action, by truth, by respect. The crowd roared. Not for war, but for hope. Later that evening, as stars filled the alien sky, Vile sat on the rooftop garden beside Rin. Tali braided Ina's hair near the fountain. Laughing quietly, guards watched from a distance, not to protect from him, but to protect what he had built. Vile turned to him. Did you ever imagine this? She asked. Rin smiled slightly. No, he said. I just wanted to live. She rested her head on his shoulder. Well, you gave us more than that, she whispered. You gave us a new way to breathe, and so the story of the humans spread. Across the stars, not as a tale of war, but as a legend of transformation. He didn't take the galaxy by force, he earned it. By breaking no one but expectations, and now in the new house of flame and stone. The once fallen princess, her fearless maids, and the quiet human warrior led a world that finally remembered that the strongest empire is not built with power, but with people who choose to stay.